Have you ever had someone you love make you feel worthless in front of strangers? Like everything you are, everything you do amounts to nothing in their eyes. I'm Elena Russo, and my husband spent 15 years mocking my cooking, my heritage, and my peasant ways, never knowing that the grandmother's cookbook he ridiculed held the key to a $5 million inheritance that was always mine. Before we dive in, I need to know, where are you right now? Are you in your kitchen, maybe cooking dinner? On your couch after a long day? Commuting home? Drop your location in the comments. I want to know who's here with me because this story, it's about finding your worth when the person who should cherish you tries to convince you you're worthless. And trust me, by the end, you'll understand why your presence here matters. Let me take you back to where it all began. Brooklyn, New York, 2008. I was 23 years old, fresh out of NYU with a degree in hospitality management and dreams bigger than the city skyline. I met David Chen at a networking event in Manhattan, one of those stiff corporate mixers where everyone's trying too hard to impress each other. David was 28, an associate at Goldman Sachs, third-generation Chinese American with an Ivy League education and ambitions that matched mine. At least, I thought they matched mine. He was charming that night, asked about my degree, my interests, my family. When I told him my grandmother had immigrated from Sicily and taught me to cook traditional Italian food, his eyes lit up. "I love authentic Italian cuisine," he said. "Not that Olive Garden garbage. Real food, made with passion." I was smitten. We dated for 18 months before he proposed at Per Se, Thomas Keller's restaurant, 3 Michelin stars, overlooking Central Park. It was perfect. A $400 tasting menu, a ring that cost more than my first car, and a man who seemed to see my value. I should have paid more attention to the cracks that were already forming. David's parents, Robert and Patricia Chen, lived in Scarsdale, in a house that screamed old money, even though Robert had made his fortune in tech investments only 20 years prior. Patricia had been a corporate attorney before retiring to focus on charity boards and making sure everyone knew the Chens were important. Our first dinner at their house, I offered to cook. "Oh, how quaint," Patricia said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "David, darling, I didn't realize your girlfriend was a cook." "Chef. Well, aspiring chef. I want to open a restaurant someday." Robert laughed, not unkindly, but dismissively. "Restaurant business is brutal. 90% fail in the first year. You'd be better off using that hospitality degree for hotel management, something stable." David squeezed my hand under the table. "Elena's passionate about cooking. I think it's great." I thought he was defending me. Looking back, he was placating me. We got married in 2010. Small wedding. David insisted on small, said his parents preferred intimate affairs. What he meant was they were embarrassed by my family. My mother, Rosa, who worked as a seamstress in Bensonhurst, my uncle Tony, who owned a pizza shop in Bay Ridge, my cousins who spoke too loud and laughed too much and didn't understand that the Chens valued quiet sophistication over authentic joy. My Nona, my grandmother, Julia Russo, was the only one who saw through David from the beginning. "Elena, cara mia," she said the night before the wedding, holding my face in her weathered hands. "This man, he loves what you do for him, not who you are." "Nona, that's not fair." "You will see," she said sadly. "You will see." Nona died 6 months after our wedding. Pneumonia, sudden and devastating. She was 87, but she'd been healthy, vibrant, cooking in her Brooklyn kitchen until the week before she got sick. At her funeral, she left me 3 things: her gold cross necklace, her wedding ring, and her cookbook. Not just any cookbook, the cookbook. A leather-bound journal she'd kept since arriving in America in 1952, filled with recipes written in Italian, stained with olive oil and tomato sauce, pages worn soft from decades of use. recipes for her famous Sunday gravy, her Christmas Eve feast of the 7 fishes, her Easter bread, her biscotti that people drove from New Jersey to taste. My Nona, my grandmother, wanted you to have this, my mother said, pressing it into my hands. She said you're the only one who understood what food means, not just eating, but love, memory, family. I cried holding that cookbook, breathing in the scent of old paper and spices, feeling Nona's presence in every page. David barely glanced at it. "That's nice, babe. Put it somewhere safe." What he didn't know, what no one knew except Nona and her lawyer, was what was hidden inside that cookbook. Between the recipe for her famous ossobuco and her secret tiramisu, tucked into a small envelope glued to the inside back cover, was a property deed. A deed to a building in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, a 3-story brownstone on a corner lot purchased by my grandfather in 1955 for $12,000, a building that in 2010 was worth approximately $1.2 million. And a letter from Nona, written in her careful handwriting. Cara Elena, this building is yours. Your Nono and I bought it when we came to America with nothing but hope. We rented the apartments, saved every penny, and dreamed that one day our granddaughter, you, my sweet girl, would use it to build something beautiful. The ground floor is empty, ready for your restaurant. The apartments above will give you income while you build your dream. But Elena, you must promise me something. Never let anyone make you small. Never let anyone convince you that your dreams are less important than their comfort. If a man truly loves you, he will celebrate your success, not feel threatened by it. If he mocks what you create, he does not deserve to share in what you build. This is your inheritance, yours alone. The deed is in your name. Use it wisely. Ti amo sempre, Nona. I found this letter, indeed, 2 weeks after her funeral, when I finally had the courage to open her cookbook without crying. I sat on the floor of our Brooklyn Heights apartment and stared at that piece of paper, my hands shaking. $1.2 million, just sitting there, hidden in a cookbook David had dismissed as old-fashioned ethnic nostalgia. I didn't tell him. Something in Nona's letter made me hesitate. If a man truly loves you, he will celebrate your success, not feel threatened by it. I decided to wait, to see, to test maybe, though I didn't admit that to myself at the time. I kept cooking. David kept working late, pulling 100-hour weeks, making his way up the Goldman Sachs ladder. I took a job as a sous chef at a small Italian restaurant in the West Village, learning the business side of running a kitchen. And slowly, David's mask began to slip. It started small. Little comments that seemed like jokes but carried an edge. "Honey, maybe we should order in tonight. I've had Italian food all week." I'd made chicken piccata twice that month. "You smell like garlic again. Can you shower before we go to Mom and Dad's?" The guys at work were talking about their wives cooking. I didn't mention yours. Didn't want to make them jealous. Said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. By 2012, David had made VP. We moved to a bigger apartment in Tribeca, all glass and steel and minimalist furniture Patricia helped him select. My cooking pots looked out of place in that sterile kitchen. "Do we really need all these?" David asked, gesturing to my collection of cast iron pans and copper pots. "It's cluttered." "I use them," I said. "For what? We eat out half the time anyway." That was true. David preferred taking clients to Nobu, to Le Bernardin, to all the restaurants where being seen mattered more than the food itself. "Remember when you said you loved authentic Italian food?" I asked one night after he'd criticized my braciole for being too heavy. "I do love it, in restaurants, with professional chefs. I am a professional chef." "You work at a restaurant, Elena. You're not a chef. You know what I mean." I knew exactly what he meant. I wasn't Wolfgang Puck. I wasn't Mario Batali. I was just Elena, cooking Nona's recipes in a kitchen my husband found embarrassing. The worst was when his colleagues came over. David had been invited to join an exclusive investment group, 6 senior VPs and their spouses, meeting quarterly for dinner and networking, rotating hosts. When it was our turn, I was excited. Finally, a chance to show David's world what I could do. I planned for weeks, a 7-course Italian tasting menu, inspired by Nona's recipes, but elevated. Burrata with heirloom tomatoes and basil oil, handmade tajarine pasta with white truffle, branzino roasted whole with fennel and lemon, ossobuco that had been braising for hours, fresh panna cotta with blood orange. I spent 3 days preparing. I took time off work. I made everything from scratch, the pasta, the bread, the dessert. The dinner was on a Saturday in October 2013. Our Tribeca apartment gleaming, table set with the china Patricia had given us, candles glowing. David came home at 5 p.m., 2 hours before guests were due to arrive. He walked into the kitchen, saw me covered in flour, pots on every burner, and his face fell. Jesus, Elena, what is all this? Dinner. The dinner party for your colleagues. I thought you were going to keep it simple, get it catered maybe. You said I could cook. I said you could handle dinner. I didn't think you'd... He gestured helplessly at my kitchen, which looked like a restaurant mid-service. This is too much. It's going to be amazing, David. Trust me. He didn't look convinced. The guests arrived at 7 p.m. 3 couples, all dressed like they were going to the Met Gala. The women wore designer dresses and heels that cost more than my monthly salary. The men wore suits that probably came from their personal tailors. I served the first course, the burrata. I'd arranged it artfully, the cheese creamy and perfect, the tomatoes from the Union Square Farmers Market, the basil oil fragrant and bright. "Oh, how rustic," said Margaret, wife of David's direct supervisor. She poked at the burrata with her fork. "Is this mozzarella?" "Burrata," I explained. "It's like mozzarella but creamier inside." She took a tiny bite. "Interesting." The conversation moved on to stock portfolios and vacation homes in the Hamptons. I retreated to the kitchen for the second course. The pasta was perfect. I'd rolled it by hand that morning, thin as silk, and dressed it with just butter, parmesan, and white truffle I'd splurged on. Simple, elegant, letting the quality of ingredients shine. David took one bite and said, "This is very simple. Elena, did you use regular butter?" "European butter, cultured." "Oh," he laughed, looking at his colleagues. "Elena's very into the authentic Italian thing. Sometimes I tell her we have Kerrygold in the fridge, and she acts like I've committed a crime." They all laughed, like my standards were a joke. "My grandmother was from Sicily," I said, keeping my voice even. "She taught me that simple food, done right, is better than complicated food done poorly." "Of course," Margaret said in that tone that meant the opposite. "There's definitely something to be said for traditional cooking." The rest of the dinner went similarly. Every course I brought out, David or one of his colleagues had a comment. "This fish still has its head on." "Yes, that's how it's properly served." "This meat is falling off the bone. Is it supposed to be that soft?" "Yes, ossobuco is braised for hours." "I'm so full I don't know if I can manage dessert," said by someone who'd barely eaten 3 bites of each course. But the worst moment came during dessert. I'd made panna cotta, Nona's recipe, infused with vanilla bean and topped with a blood orange reduction. It was silky, delicate, just sweet enough. As I served it, one of the wives, Jennifer, said, "Elena, this has been such an educational dinner. Where did you train? CIA? ICE?" "My grandmother's kitchen," I said proudly. "She taught me everything." The table went quiet. Then David laughed, that nervous laugh people do when they're embarrassed. Elena's grandmother was an incredible home cook, very traditional. Elena's been trying to capture that homey feeling. Homey? Like my food was amateur hour, like 15 years of cooking, years of professional experience, meant nothing because I hadn't gone to some fancy culinary school. Well, Jennifer said, it's certainly hearty, very filling. They left by 10 p.m., barely 2 hours after arriving. Normal dinner parties in their circle went until 1 a.m. They couldn't get out fast enough. After they left, I was cleaning up the kitchen, most of the food barely touched, hours of work scraped into trash, when David came in. That was a disaster, he said. I froze, hands in soapy water. What? The dinner. Elena, you told me to keep it simple. Instead, you served them peasant food. Peasant food? My voice was barely a whisper. You know what I mean. The whole fish with the head on, the meat in that heavy sauce. It was too much, too ethnic. Ethnic? David, you told me you loved Italian food. In restaurants, made by professional chefs who know how to elevate it. Not this. This is the kind of food you eat in some little place in Brooklyn, not what you serve to Goldman Sachs VPs. Something broke inside me then. Not shattered, that would come later, but cracked, fissured. You're embarrassed by my cooking. You're embarrassed that you don't understand the difference between home cooking and entertaining at this level. My career is on the line here, Elena. These dinners matter, and you served them something my housekeeper could have made. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. This wasn't the man who'd proposed over a tasting menu. This was someone who'd decided I was a liability to his climb up the corporate ladder. Get out of my kitchen, I said quietly. Elena, get out. He left. I finished cleaning alone, tears mixing with dish soap, and made a decision. I would never tell David about Nona's inheritance, because Nona was right. If a man truly loved me, he would celebrate what I created, not feel threatened by it. And David had just proven he didn't love me at all. The next morning, I called the lawyer whose name was on Nona's letter. Antonio Benedetti had been my grandparents' attorney for 40 years. He was semi-retired now, in his 70s, working out of a small office in Bensonhurst. When I explained who I was, his voice warmed immediately. Elena, Julia's granddaughter. She spoke of you constantly. Did you receive her gift? The cookbook, and what was inside, yes. Ah, good. And the building, have you seen it? Not yet. Mr. Benedetti, I need advice. I told him everything. The dinner party, David's comments, years of subtle mockery building to that moment. And I told him I'd never mention the inheritance to my husband. Smart girl, he said. Your Nona was wise. She put that building in your name alone, purchased before your marriage, titled as your separate property. Even in New York, it would be very difficult for a spouse to claim any interest in it. So it's mine? Completely? Completely. The question is, what do you want to do with it? I thought about Nona's letter, about the empty ground floor ready for a restaurant, about 15 years of dreams deferred because David's career always came first. I want to open a restaurant, I said. I want to do it right, and I don't want my husband to know anything about it until I'm ready. Then we have work to do. Over the next 6 months, I lived a double life. During the day, I worked at the West Village restaurant, learning everything I could about operations, costs, staffing. My boss, Chef Marco, was a second-generation Italian-American who'd opened 3 successful restaurants. When I told him I was thinking about opening my own place, he became my informal mentor. Location is everything, he said, and concept. What makes you different? Why should people come to your place instead of the 1,000 other Italian restaurants in New York? Because it'll be real, not elevated or modern, just honest Italian-American food, the way my grandmother made it, the way people's grandmothers made it before everyone decided Italian food had to be fancy to be good. His eyes lit up. That's it. That's your angle. Nostalgia, authenticity, food that tastes like home. At night and on weekends, while David worked late or played golf with clients, I worked on my restaurant. I met with contractors about renovating the ground floor of Nona's building. It needed everything: new plumbing, electrical, kitchen equipment, dining room build-out. Mr. Benedetti helped me get small business loans using the building as collateral. Between the equity and my own savings, I had about $400,000 to work with. I interviewed chefs, servers, managers. I developed a menu that honored Nona's recipes while being practical for a restaurant kitchen. I learned about permits, insurance, health codes, liquor licenses. I worked 16-hour days. David barely noticed. "Working late again?" he'd ask, not looking up from his laptop. "Yeah, busy at the restaurant." He never asked which restaurant, never asked why I was suddenly working such long hours. He was too absorbed in his own career, his own ambitions, to notice his wife was building something without him. The building in Carroll Gardens was beautiful. 3 stories of brownstone, original details preserved, on a corner lot with huge windows perfect for a restaurant. The upper floors had 2 apartments, a 2-bedroom and a 1-bedroom, both currently rented to long-term tenants who paid below-market rent because they'd been there for years. You could raise their rent, the property manager suggested. Get market rate, increase your income. No, I said, thinking of Nonna and Nonno, who'd always treated their tenants like family. They're good people. They take care of the building. Some things matter more than maximum profit. The restaurant took shape slowly. We exposed the original brick walls, installed an open kitchen so diners could watch us cook, hung family photos on the walls: Nonna and Nonno's wedding, their arrival in New York, their first restaurant jobs, family gatherings around crowded tables. I named it Julia's, after my grandmother. David never asked about the photos I was looking through at night, never questioned why I was suddenly spending money on cooking classes, contractor meetings, and professional development, restaurant planning sessions. In March 2014, we had our soft opening, friends and family only, testing the kitchen and service. My mother came, my Uncle Tony, cousins I hadn't seen in years. They filled the dining room, eating and laughing and crying because the food tasted like Nonna's. "Elena," my mother said, holding my face like Nonna used to. She would be so proud. David was in London that week for work. I didn't mention the soft opening. He wouldn't have come anyway. We officially opened in May 2014. I'd kept my job at the West Village restaurant, telling Chef Marco I needed to stay part-time for financial reasons. Really, I wasn't ready to tell David I had my own place. Some superstitious part of me wanted to make sure it would succeed first. Julia's took off immediately. The New York Times reviewed us in our 3rd week, 3 stars. A love letter to Italian-American cooking. Elena Russo serves food that tastes like memory, like home, like someone's Nonna spent all day in the kitchen just for you. New York Magazine included us in their Best New Restaurants list. Julia's proves that the best Italian food in New York isn't at $200 per person temples to molecular gastronomy, but in a small Carroll Gardens brownstone where love is the secret ingredient. We were booked solid 6 weeks out. I had to hire 2 more line cooks and a 2nd sous chef. The restaurant was making money, actual profit, within 4 months, and David still had no idea. He knew I'd left my West Village job. I told him I wanted to freelance consult for a while, figure out what came next. He barely reacted. As long as I was home to host his occasional dinner parties, catered now, never home cooked, he didn't care what I did. I was making about $150,000 a year from Julia's by the end of 2014. Between that and the rental income from the apartments, I had more money than I'd ever had in my life. I put it in a separate bank account David didn't know about, saved and invested it, planned for the future. Because I knew, the way you know things in your bones, that this marriage had an expiration date. I just didn't know it would come so soon or so publicly. In February 2015, David came home with news. He'd been nominated for managing director. At 35, he'd be one of the youngest MDs in Goldman Sachs history. "This is it," he said, actually showing excitement for the first time in months. "This is what we've been working toward." We. Like I'd been part of it. Like my sacrificed dreams and swallowed pride had contributed to his success. "That's wonderful, David. There's going to be a dinner next month at my boss's house in Greenwich. All the MD candidates and their spouses. It's basically the final test. They want to see how we handle ourselves socially, if our wives fit the culture." My stomach dropped. "Your boss's house." "Richard Sterling's estate. It's going to be formal, black tie, catered by Daniel Boulot's team. Elena, this is important. We need to make a good impression." "I'll do my best." He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in weeks. "Wear the dress Mom bought you, the Chanel, and maybe tone down the jewelry. The gold cross is a bit much for this crowd." The gold cross. Nana's gold cross, which I wore every day. "I'll think about it," I said. The dinner was scheduled for March 14th. I had 4 weeks to prepare myself for an evening of being judged by David's superiors and their perfectly polished wives. But I had other things on my mind. Julia's was expanding. I'd gotten an offer to open a second location in the West Village, partnering with a hospitality group that had seen our success and wanted to invest. It was a huge opportunity, but also a huge risk. I met with the investors, lawyers, accountants, ran the numbers, developed the business plan. The week before David's important dinner, I signed the papers for Julia's West Village. We'd open in September. I was building an empire, one restaurant at a time, and my husband had no idea. March 14th arrived cold and rainy. David left work early to pick me up. The drive to Greenwich would take over an hour in Saturday traffic. I wore the Chanel dress Patricia had bought me, black and severe and expensive. I looked like I belonged in that world of wealth and power. But I kept Nana's cross on, hidden under the dress, but there, my secret armor. Richard Sterling's estate was exactly what you'd expect. 20 acres in Greenwich, Connecticut, a colonial revival mansion that probably had 15 bedrooms, circular driveway with a fountain, gardens that required a full-time staff. We were greeted by actual butlers, not servers, butlers. They took our coats and directed us to the drawing room where cocktails were being served. 12 couples, all in our 30s and 40s, all dressed like we were auditioning for roles in Succession. The men talked markets and deals. The wives discussed their children's private schools and their winter homes in St. Bart's. I smiled and nodded and sipped my champagne, feeling like an anthropologist studying an alien species. Dinner was announced at 8 p.m. We moved to a dining room that could have hosted a royal banquet. The table was set with china that was probably older than America. Crystal glasses caught the light from a chandelier that might have cost more than most people's houses. I was seated between David and another MD candidate named James. His wife, Catherine, sat across from me, dripping in Harry Winston diamonds. "So, Elena," Catherine said as the first course, oysters with champagne mignonette, "what do you do?" The question every wife dreaded at these things, because the answer was supposed to be, "I'm on the board of this charity," or "I'm a partner at this law firm," or "I manage our family's foundation," not "I work." "I'm in the restaurant industry," I said carefully. "Oh, how interesting. Do you do PR, marketing?" "I'm a chef. I own a restaurant." You could have heard a pin drop at our end of the table. Several people stopped eating. You own a restaurant? Catherine's perfectly microbladed eyebrows rose. How entrepreneurial. David jumped in quickly. It's a small place, more of a hobby, really. I felt that familiar sensation, being made smaller, being dismissed. It's not a hobby, I said quietly. It's a business. We've been open 10 months and we're profitable. Where is it? Asked Richard Sterling from the head of the table. His eyes were sharp, calculating. Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn. Brooklyn? He said it like I'd said Mars. David, I didn't realize your wife was working in Brooklyn. The way he said working made it sound vaguely embarrassing, like I'd admitted to something shameful. Like I said, David said, his voice tight. Small operation. Alema's passionate about cooking. Passion is lovely, Patricia Sterling said, Richard Sterling's wife from the other end of the table. But at this level, David, we find it's best when spouses focus on supporting their husbands' careers rather than pursuing distractions. Distractions. My restaurant, my success, my dream was a distraction. I opened my mouth to respond, but David kicked me under the table, a warning. The dinner continued, course after course prepared by Daniel Boulot's team. It was technically perfect, precisely cooked, beautifully plated, expensive ingredients. And it was soulless, like eating in a museum, beautiful but cold. This is exceptional, one of the wives gushed. I could never produce anything like this. That's what private chefs are for, Patricia said. I haven't cooked in 20 years. Why would I? That's what staff does. They all laughed. The idea of cooking your own food was hilarious to them. I thought about Nana, who'd cooked every meal for her family until the week before she died, who'd believed that feeding people was an act of love, who'd built a life in America with her hands, her skill, her refusal to be ashamed of where she came from. And I felt Nana's cross against my chest, hidden but present. I think cooking for people you love is a gift, I said suddenly. The table went quiet again. My grandmother used to say that anyone can pay someone to make food, but cooking for someone yourself, that's how you show them they matter. How quaint, Patricia said, but her eyes were ice. After dinner, the men retired to Richard's study for cigars and scotch. The wives gathered in the conservatory for coffee and gossip. I lasted 15 minutes listening to them discuss their personal trainers and interior decorators before I excused myself to use the restroom. I found myself in a hallway lined with family photos, Richard Sterling's impressive lineage, generations of wealth, privilege, power. Every photo screamed, "We matter, we always have." I pulled out my phone, and I had 17 missed calls from my manager at Julia's. My heart dropped. I called back immediately. "Elena, thank God, we have a situation." "What's wrong?" "Food critic from Eater just walked in, unannounced, and we're slammed. I need you to talk me through the special prep. I'm at a dinner in Greenwich. I can't. Please, you're the only one who knows how to properly finish Nana's ossobuco. I can't mess this up." I looked back toward the conservatory where I could hear the wives laughing about something. Then I made a decision. "Walk me through it. I'll talk you through every step." For the next 20 minutes, I stood in Richard Sterling's hallway, phone pressed to my ear, coaching my kitchen through Saturday night service, guiding them through recipes, timing, plating, being the chef and owner I actually was, not the decorative wife David wanted me to be. I was so focused, I didn't hear David approach.
"What the hell are you doing?" I spun around. David stood there, his face red, his eyes furious. "My restaurant had an emergency." "Your restaurant." He practically spat the words. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing tonight has been? Everyone asking about your little Brooklyn place? Patricia Sterling asked me if we were having financial troubles, if that's why my wife was working." "Working isn't shameful, David. It is when you're married to someone trying to make MD at Goldman Sachs. It is when your wife is supposed to be supporting your career, not running around Brooklyn playing chef." playing chef? I am a chef, a successful one. My restaurant has been reviewed by the Times, featured in New York Magazine. I don't care. His voice echoed in the hallway. I don't care about your restaurant or your reviews or any of it. All I care about is that you made me look bad tonight. You made me look like I can't control my own wife. Control. That word hung between us, revealing everything. I'm not something to be controlled. Then maybe you're not the right wife for this life. The words hit like a slap. We stared at each other, years of resentment and disappointment crystallizing in that moment. Mr. Chen? A butler appeared at the end of the hallway. Mr. Sterling is asking for you in the study. David straightened his tie, his face going blank, the corporate mask sliding back into place. We'll discuss this at home. He walked away without looking back. I stood there, shaking, Nana's cross pressing against my heart, and I realized I was done. Done pretending, done shrinking, done apologizing for being exactly who I'd always been. I went back to the conservatory, smiled through another hour of meaningless conversation, and rode home in silence with David. The entire drive back to Manhattan, neither of us spoke. When we got to our Tribeca apartment, David poured himself a scotch and turned to face me. We need to talk about your restaurant. No, I said. We need to talk about our marriage. Our marriage would be fine if you weren't so focused on this cooking obsession. It's not an obsession. It's my career, my passion, my dream, the things you claimed to love about me when we met. I loved that you were passionate. I didn't realize you'd be so stubborn about it. Stubborn. You mean unwilling to give up who I am to make you look good. He set down his drink. I've given you everything. This apartment, financial security, a lifestyle most people only dream of, and you're throwing it away for what? To serve pasta to hipsters in Brooklyn? I'm not throwing anything away. I built something on my own, without your money or your help or your permission. I built something that matters. It's a restaurant, Elena. It's not curing cancer. No, I agreed. It's feeding people. It's making them happy. It's honoring my grandmother's legacy. It's creating jobs. It's building community. And you know what? That matters more than whatever the hell you do at Goldman Sachs. His face went very still. Be careful. Or what? You'll leave me? Please, save us both the trouble. You wouldn't survive a divorce. You'd have nothing. I almost laughed. He had no idea about the building, the inheritance, the second restaurant about to open, the success I'd built completely independent of him. You know what, David? I think we should take some time apart. You want a separation? I want space to think about whether this marriage is what I want, whether you are who I want. He stared at me like I'd grown a second head. In his world, wives didn't question, wives didn't demand, wives certainly didn't suggest separation. Fine, he said. Fine, take your space, but don't expect me to wait around while you figure out your feelings. I wouldn't dream of it. He grabbed his coat and left, probably to his office, or to a hotel, or to wherever men like David went when their carefully controlled worlds started crumbling. I stood there, in our sterile Tribeca apartment, surrounded by furniture I'd never chosen, in a life I'd never really wanted, and felt lighter than I had in years. Then I called my lawyer.
The divorce proceedings started in April 2015. David was confident. Too confident. He had his fancy attorneys, his Goldman Sachs salary, his family's money behind him. What he didn't have was any claim to my assets. My lawyer, Jessica Morris, was a shark in Louboutins. She'd handled several high-net-worth divorces and came highly recommended by Mr. Benedetti. "Let me make sure I understand," she said at our first meeting, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "You own a building in Carroll Gardens, purchased before your marriage and titled solely in your name. You own a successful restaurant worth approximately $800,000, also solely in your name. You're opening a second location with outside investment, but again, your ownership interest is separate property. Yes, and your husband doesn't know about any of this. Not the building, not the restaurant's success, not the second location, nothing. She smiled, the smile of a predator who just spotted prey. This is going to be fun. David's attorneys came at us hard. They demanded full financial disclosure, expecting to find a struggling part-time chef with minimal assets. Instead, we provided documentation showing Julia's original location valued at $1.8 million, the building plus business, the second location deal, my 60% ownership stake, worth approximately $600,000, rental income from the brownstone apartments, $48,000 annually, my personal savings, $230,000, investment portfolio, $150,000. Total, roughly $2.8 million in assets, all separate property, all mine alone. David's assets? About $1.2 million, mostly in retirement accounts and stock options. This is impossible, his attorney sputtered at our first mediation session. Where did this money come from? My inheritance and my business, I said calmly. My grandmother left me a building. I used it to open a restaurant. The restaurant is successful. It's not complicated. David's face had gone purple. You've been lying to me for years. I've been building a business. You never asked. You never cared. You were too busy being embarrassed by my hobby. You deliberately hid assets. I protected assets that were mine before we married. Assets purchased with inherited property, separate from any marital funds. My client has done nothing illegal or unethical. The mediation fell apart within an hour. David called me that night. How could you do this? Do what? Build a successful business? Create something meaningful? Not tell you every detail of my life when you stopped caring about me years ago? I cared about you. You cared about the version of me that made you comfortable, the version that stayed small so you could feel big, the version that cooked when you wanted to impress people but disappeared when my cooking embarrassed you. But that was never really me, David. So this whole time you were, what, testing me? No, living my life, building my dream, becoming who I was always meant to be. You just never bothered to notice. He was silent for a long moment. Everyone at work is talking about how I didn't even know my wife was wealthy, about how I didn't make MD because my wife upstaged me. You didn't make MD because you're a mediocre banker with impressive credentials but no real vision. Your wife's success has nothing to do with your failure. I hung up before he could respond. The divorce was finalized in September 2015. No alimony, neither of us wanted support from the other, equitable distribution of true marital assets, the furniture, the wedding gifts, our joint savings account that had about $30,000 in it. David kept his retirement accounts. I kept everything I'd built. We split the cost of dissolving a marriage that should never have happened. On the day the divorce was finalized, I went to Julia's. Both locations were now open, Carroll Gardens thriving, West Village already booked solid through Christmas. I stood in the original dining room, surrounded by photos of Nona and Nono, the smell of Sunday gravy filling the air, and I felt her presence. I did it, I whispered. I built something beautiful, and I didn't let anyone make me small. That night, I cooked for the staff, family meal, the way Nona used to make it. Everyone gathered around the table in the kitchen, eating and laughing and sharing their day. This was family. This was home. This was everything David's world could never understand. The divorce freed something in me. Without David's judgment, without constantly monitoring myself to avoid embarrassment, I could finally be fully myself. And that self was ambitious. By 2017, I had 4 Julia's locations: the original, Carroll Gardens, West Village, one in Williamsburg, and one in the Upper West Side. Each slightly different, each honoring Nana's philosophy of honest food made with love, but each adapted to its neighborhood. I was making real money now. The restaurants were generating about $800,000 in annual profit combined. I'd invested wisely, bought another small building in Red Hook, started a catering company. The New York Times did a profile on me. From grandmother's kitchen to restaurant empire, Elena Russo's rise. They called me the anti-celebrity chef, someone who'd built success through quality and community rather than TV shows and cookbook deals. Though the cookbook deal came anyway. In 2018, I published Nana's Kitchen, Recipes and Stories from a Brooklyn Table. It hit the New York Times bestseller list within 2 weeks. The book featured Nana's recipes alongside stories of immigration, family, and food as love language. In the introduction, I wrote about the cookbook she'd left me, about the deed hidden inside, about building a restaurant from her gift. I didn't mention David by name, but anyone who knew our story could read between the lines. I was interviewed on Good Morning America, NPR's The Splendid Table, and Food Network's The Next Iron Chef. I declined to compete, but agreed to be a guest judge. People magazine named me one of their 50 women changing the world in their 2019 issue. Not because I'd cured disease or solved poverty, but because I'd shown that success could look like staying true to your roots, that you didn't have to abandon where you came from to achieve where you were going. I used my platform deliberately. I started a scholarship fund for culinary students from immigrant families. I hired formerly incarcerated people at my restaurants, giving them second chances. I partnered with City Harvest to donate excess food to homeless shelters. You could make more money if you streamlined operations, my accountant said. Some of your hiring practices, your charitable work, it cuts into profits. I make enough, I said. Nana always said you should make enough to live well and share the rest. I'm living well, now I share. But the success came with complications. My mother worried I was working too hard. My cousins asked for loans, which I gave, but as investments in their businesses, not handouts. Random people came out of the woodwork claiming to be long-lost relatives. And then there were the men. Dating as a successful woman in New York was interesting. Men either found my success intimidating or saw me as a meal ticket. I went on a few dates, had a few short relationships, but nothing serious. I was too busy building my empire to settle for someone who didn't truly see me. Until I met Antonio. He was a food distributor, third-generation Italian-American like me, running his family's business supplying restaurants with imported Italian products. He'd been courting Julia's business for months, always professional, always respectful. One day, in 2019, he came by the Carroll Gardens location to drop off a sample of a new olive oil his company was importing from Sicily. We got talking about our family's regions in Italy, his family from the same area as mine, near Palermo. He said, "My grandmother used to make this pasta with sardines and wild fennel. She said it tasted like Sicily." "Pasta con lasaite," I said. "Nana made it too, on Good Friday." His eyes lit up. Exactly, with the pine nuts and currants. We talked for 2 hours about family, food, tradition, about building businesses while honoring legacy, about the pressure and privilege of being third generation, carrying forward what our grandparents built. He asked me to dinner, not at one of my restaurants. He said, "I want to take you somewhere you can relax, not work," but at a small Sicilian place in Bensonhurst that had been there since the 1960s. It was perfect. We ate and talked and laughed, and at the end of the night, he walked me to my car and said, "I really enjoy talking to you, Elena. You're brilliant and driven, and you don't apologize for either." I'd waited 15 years to hear words like that. We dated for a year before he proposed. Simple, honest, in the kitchen of the original Julia's after Sunday dinner service. He said, "I love you. I love your ambition. I love your success. I love that you're building something that matters. Will you marry me?" "Yes," I said, no hesitation, because I finally understood what love was supposed to feel like. We got married in 2020, small ceremony at the Carroll Gardens restaurant, family and friends only. My mother cried. Uncle Tony made a toast about how Nana would be proud. Antonio's family welcomed me like I'd always been part of them. And this time, I knew what it meant to be truly seen, truly valued, truly loved for exactly who I was. In January 2023, nearly 8 years after the divorce, I ran into David. I was at a charity gala for the James Beard Foundation. I'd been nominated for Best Chef New York State, and the foundation was hosting a fundraiser for their scholarship program. I'd bought a table, brought my team, donated a private dinner at Julia's for the auction. I was wearing a custom gown, my hair professionally done, Nana's gold cross visible at my throat. I'd stopped hiding it years ago. The gala was at Cipriani. 500 people, mostly chefs, restaurateurs, food writers, and industry insiders. I was talking to another nominated chef when I heard a familiar voice. "Elena." I turned. David stood there, older, grayer, with a woman beside him, younger, mid-20s, pretty in a generic way, wearing a dress that screamed, "trying too hard." "David, hi. I heard you were nominated. Congratulations." "Thank you." Awkward silence. The woman beside him cleared her throat. "I'm Stephanie, David's fiancée." "Lovely to meet you," I said automatically. "Julia owns Elena," David explained. "The Italian restaurant empire. You know, the one we went to last month?" Stephanie's eyes widened. "You own that? Oh my God, I loved that place. The pasta was incredible. I told David it reminded me of my grandmother's cooking." I smiled. "That's exactly what we're going for." David looked uncomfortable. "So, how have you been?" "Really well. Restaurants are thriving. Cookbook is in its 3rd printing. I got married a few years ago." "Married?" He looked startled. "To Antonio Moretti. He runs Moretti Food Imports. We actually combined businesses last year. Vertical integration, sourcing directly from Italy for the restaurants." That's great. Really great." He didn't look like he thought it was great. He looked like he'd been punched. "Are you still at Goldman?" I asked. "Yeah, made MD finally, in 2019. "Congratulations." "Thanks. It took a while. Had to rebuild my reputation after—" He trailed off, not wanting to say, "after our divorce made me look bad." Stephanie, bless her, seemed to sense the tension. "Babe, I see Richard Sterling over there. Didn't you want to say hi?" David's face went pale. "Richard Sterling is here?" "He's on the board. He's actually been very supportive of my scholarship fund. We've become friendly." The irony was delicious. Richard Sterling, the man whose dinner party had catalyzed my marriage's end, now champions my success because successful people attract powerful people, and I was undeniably successful. "I should go," David said quickly. "It was good seeing you, Elena." "You too." I watched him walk away, Stephanie chattering beside him, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity, just nothing. He was a chapter in my story, but not the story itself. Later that night, Antonio found me on the terrace, looking out at the city. "You okay?" he asked, putting his arm around me. I ran into David. "Ah, how was that?" "Weird, but fine." He looked diminished somehow, like he'd gotten smaller while I had gotten bigger. Antonio kissed my temple. You didn't get bigger, Amorti. You just finally allowed yourself to be your full size. You were always this magnificent. Some people just couldn't see it. I leaned into him, watching the lights of New York sparkle in the winter night. Somewhere in this city, in a Carroll Gardens brownstone, Julia's was serving dinner to people who'd become family. My team was cooking Nana's recipes, feeding people's souls along with their stomachs, building community one meal at a time. I'd won. Not because David had lost, his success or failure was irrelevant to mine, but because I'd refused to stay small, because I'd built something beautiful from my grandmother's gift, because I'd honored her legacy by living fully, loving deeply, and never apologizing for who I was. "Ready to go back in?" Antonio asked. "They're about to announce the awards." "Ready." I didn't win that night. The award went to an incredible chef from Queens who deserved it, but I realized I didn't need to win. I'd already won everything that mattered.
In 2024, I made a decision that surprised everyone. I was opening a cooking school. Not a professional culinary institute, New York had plenty of those, but a community cooking school in Bensonhurst, where Nana had lived, where I'd learned to cook in her kitchen. "We'll teach traditional techniques," I explained to my board. "Italian, but also other immigrant cuisines, Chinese, Mexican, Caribbean, Polish, all the communities that built Brooklyn. We'll charge sliding scale fees so anyone can afford it, and we'll focus not just on cooking, but on food as cultural preservation." "Why?" my CFO asked. "The restaurants are profitable, the catering business is strong. Why add something that'll barely break even?" "Because Nona taught me to cook in her kitchen for free. Because I learned that food is love, identity, memory. Because there are grandmothers all over Brooklyn with recipes in their heads that'll die with them if someone doesn't write them down, teach them, pass them on." Antonio squeezed my hand. "We do it because it's the right thing to do." The Julia Russo Culinary Heritage Center opened in September 2024, a beautiful space in a renovated Bensonhurst building with 6 teaching kitchens, a demonstration theater, and a library of community cookbooks we were building, recipes donated by local families, preserved for future generations. We offered classes for kids and adults, basic cooking skills, advanced techniques, cultural deep dives into specific cuisines. We hired grandmothers as teachers, women who'd cooked their whole lives but never been paid for their knowledge. The opening gala was everything. My mother was there, Uncle Tony, cousins, Antonio's family, Chef Marco from the West Village, my staff from all the restaurants, food writers who'd supported me over the years. And standing in the back, looking awkward but present, was David. I saw him during my speech. Our eyes met across the room. He nodded, acknowledgement maybe, respect. I nodded back. After the speeches, he approached me. "Elena, this is incredible, really. What you've built, not just the restaurants, but this, preserving culture, teaching people. It's important work." "Thank you." "I owe you an apology, a real one, not the half-assed, 'I'm sorry you were hurt' apology I gave during the divorce. A real apology for making you feel small, for being ashamed of your talent, for valuing my career over your dreams. You were right about everything, and I was an idiot." I studied his face. He looked sincere, older, humbler, maybe finally aware of what he'd lost. "I appreciate that," I said. "I forgive you, not for you, for me, because holding on to anger was keeping me tethered to a version of myself I've outgrown." "You've built something amazing." "I have. But David, I was always capable of building it. You just couldn't see it. The problem was never me. It was your inability to recognize my value." He nodded slowly. "I know that now. Too late, but I know." Stephanie appeared at his elbow. "Ready to go, babe?" "Yeah." He looked at me one more time. "Be happy, Elena. You deserve it." "I am," I said honestly. "I really am."
I watched them leave, then return to my celebration. Antonio was talking to my mother, both of them laughing about something. Uncle Tony was arguing with Chef Marco about the proper way to make marinara sauce. The culinary center was full of people eating, drinking, celebrating food and culture and community. This was my legacy, not just restaurants or money or acclaim, but this, bringing people together, preserving tradition, teaching the next generation that food is more than sustenance. It's identity, it's love, it's the stories we tell and the memories we make. That night, after everyone had left, Antonio and I walked through the empty culinary center. I stopped in front of a photo we'd hung in the main hallway. Nona in her Brooklyn kitchen, hands covered in flour, smiling at the camera. "I did it, Nona," I whispered. "I built something beautiful. I never let anyone make me small." Antonio pulled me close. "She'd be so proud of you." "I hope so." We locked up and walked out into the Brooklyn night. The city lights glowed around us, and I thought about that girl I'd been, 23, naive, convinced that love meant sacrifice, convinced that being small would make someone love her. I'd learned the hardest way that you can't shrink yourself enough to make someone value you, that real love celebrates your full size, your full brightness, your full self. And I'd learned that sometimes the greatest gift isn't money or property, it's belief. Nona believed in me enough to give me the tools to build my dreams. Now I was paying that forward, giving others the same gift. So, here we are. You've been with me through this whole journey, from that awful dinner at Richard Sterling's house to this moment where I'm running a restaurant empire and a culinary heritage center, married to a man who celebrates my success, living the life Nana dreamed for me. What did you think? Did the story resonate with you? Have you ever been made to feel small by someone who should have made you feel valued? Drop a comment and tell me your story. I read every single one. Let me tell you what I've learned through all of this. Lessons that cost me years of pain, but gave me wisdom worth more than the $5 million in property and business I've built. First, your worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to see it. David couldn't see my value because he was too insecure to celebrate someone else's success. That was his limitation, not my lack. Second, real love doesn't ask you to be smaller. It doesn't require you to dim your light so someone else can shine brighter. Real love says, "You're magnificent. Be more magnificent. I'll celebrate every success, every achievement, every dream you chase." Third, sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well, building something beautiful, becoming so successful that the people who dismissed you have to acknowledge what they missed. I didn't expose David at some public event. I didn't humiliate him deliberately. I just lived my life, built my empire, and let my success speak for itself. Sometimes that's the most powerful statement you can make. Fourth, honor the people who believed in you. Nana gave me more than a building. She gave me permission to be fully myself. She gave me the foundation to build my dreams. I honor her every day by refusing to be small, by feeding people with love, by preserving the traditions she taught me. And finally, it's never too late to reclaim yourself. I was 30 when I started secretly building Julia's, 33 when I divorced, 35 when I really hit my stride. You're never too old, never too late, never too far down the wrong path to choose a different direction. If you're watching this right now and you're in a relationship where someone makes you feel inadequate, where you're constantly apologizing for your ambitions or your success or your dreams, I want you to hear this clearly. You deserve better. You deserve someone who sees your full value and celebrates it. Someone who makes you feel bigger, not smaller. And if you don't have that someone, be that someone for yourself. Celebrate your own success. Recognize your own value. Build your own empire, whether that's a literal business or just a life that feels authentic and full. The cookbook Nana left me wasn't just recipes, it was a roadmap to reclaiming myself. What's your cookbook? What's the thing you love that someone told you wasn't valuable? What's the dream you deferred because someone convinced you it didn't matter? Find it, reclaim it, build from it. You don't need a $5 million inheritance to start. You just need belief in yourself and the courage to refuse to stay small. I'm not going to lie, building this empire was hard. There were nights I cried from exhaustion, days I questioned everything, moments I wanted to give up. But every time I doubted, I touched Nana's cross and remembered she believed I could do this. She gave me the tools. Now I had to have the courage to use them. And you know what I learned? Success is sweeter when you build it yourself, when you don't owe it to anyone else's money or connections or approval, when you can look at what you've created and say, I did this, me, with my own hands, my own vision, my own refusal to accept being less than I am. 7 Julia's locations now, a catering company, a culinary heritage center, a best-selling cookbook, a happy marriage, a life built on my terms. But you know what I'm most proud of? The scholarship program, the formerly incarcerated workers who've rebuilt their lives through my restaurants, the grandmothers teaching classes at the culinary center, finally being paid for knowledge they've carried their whole lives. The families who bring their kids to Julia's and tell me it tastes like my childhood, like my grandmother's kitchen. That's legacy. Not money, not fame, but impact, connection, community. David taught me what I didn't want. Antonio showed me what I deserved. But Nana gave me everything I needed. The foundation, literally and figuratively. The permission to be fully myself. The belief that I was enough exactly as I was. So, to everyone watching, be someone's Nana. Believe in people. Give them permission to be magnificent. Celebrate their success instead of feeling threatened by it. And if you need someone to believe in you while you're building that belief in yourself, I believe in you. I believe you're capable of more than you think. I believe you deserve to be celebrated, not tolerated. I believe your dreams matter. Now, go out there and build something beautiful. Start small if you need to, but start. Take the first step toward reclaiming yourself, your dreams, your full-sized, undimmed, unapologetic self. And if this story meant something to you, I need you to do something for me. Hit that like button. It helps more people find this story, and maybe someone out there needs to hear it today. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future stories about people who refused to stay small. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that they're enough. Drop a comment telling me, where are you watching from? What's the dream you've been deferring? What's your version of Nana's cookbook? The thing you love that someone told you doesn't matter. Let's build a community here, a space where we remind each other that we're all enough, exactly as we are. Thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for caring enough to watch until the end. This is Elena Russo, reminding you, you are not too ambitious. You are not too much. You are not too anything. You are exactly right, exactly enough, exactly magnificent. Now go out there and prove it to yourself. Ciao, beautiful people. Until next time.